Thank you for your patience, everyone, while we worked out those few glitches. Welcome to our public planning meeting, our special council meeting for September the 20th. Thank you to staff and members of the public and those that are joining us online. I will mention that Councillor Drodge is in attendance this evening. However, he's attending virtually. So, Councillor for Ward 7. So the first thing, we did have a special council meeting earlier that was not a planning meeting. So we first need to start this meeting by reconvening our public planning meeting portion of the agenda. Could I ask for a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Richardson, Councillor Ices, all those in favor? That is carried. So I just ask, if you do have a cell phone or any other device that makes noise, if I could ask you just to check and make sure that it's on mute, that would be wonderful. And I will ask, then I'll just say that I'd like to advise that this meeting is being live streamed, audio and video recorded, and shall form part of the record, which will be retained in accordance with the town's retention bylaw. And for more information about the collection, please contact the clerk's office. The item being brought forward this evening is for information and public consultation purposes only, and there will be no decisions made this evening. I'll now ask Councillor Richardson to provide our land acknowledgement statement.
The town of Innisfil acknowledges that the town of Innisfil is situated on treaty land that is steeped in rich Indigenous history. The town also acknowledges that this land is the traditional territories of the First Peoples of Turtle Island. It is shared between the Anishinaabe peoples of Beausoleil First Nation, Chippewas of Rama First Nation, and Chippewas of Georgina Island First Nation, and we thank them for their generations of stewardship. This meeting place is still the home to many Indigenous people, and as settlers, we are grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land. The town acknowledges the forced sacrifices that are the foundation of Canadian society today. We are dedicated to honoring Indigenous history and culture and committed to moving forward in the spirit of reconciliation and respect with all First Nation, Métis, and Inuit.
Thank you, Councillor Richardson. Tonight's item, first I should ask if there's any declarations of pecuniary interest on this item here this evening. Seeing none, tonight's item concerns proposed amendments to the town's official plan and comprehensive zoning bylaw number 080-13 and a draft plan subdivision for 6225 Yonge Street. We're going to start with a presentation from staff and consultants. Council may have a few questions or comments, and then we'll have an opportunity for the public part of the meeting. At that time, we'll hear from members of the public, both that are here and any that are online and wish to speak. We'd like you to keep your comments to 5 minutes to ask your questions or express your concerns, and then staff or the consultant will respond where possible. If they're not able to give you a response this evening, when the planning report comes back to council, any questions that you have would be addressed at that time. Should you need more than 5 minutes, you're welcome to stay. After everyone's had the opportunity to speak once, you can come up a second time if you need to ask something else or get clarification on something. After all members of the public have provided comment, council will receive this information tonight. Should any member of the public watching the live stream wish to make a comment, they can email clerk services, and these comments will be provided to council and town staff and taken into consideration before council makes a final decision. You may also be added to the circulation list as an interested party, where you'll be kept updated on any future information regarding this planning item. The email will be listed on the PowerPoint during the meeting and is also available on tonight's agenda that can be found on the town's website. We'll now hear from the town clerk, Patty Toma, on how public notice of this meeting was provided.
Thank you, Your Worship. In accordance with the Planning Act, notice for this public meeting was provided to required agencies and all landowners within 120 metres of the subject lands on August 31st, 2023, along with corresponding signage and notice was also posted in the Innisfil Journal. Information on this development, including reports submitted in support of the applications, are also posted on the town's Get Involved Innisfil.ca website for review and commenting.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Has any correspondence been received by Clerk Services concerning the item?
Thank you, Your Worship. And no pieces of correspondence have been received by the Clerk's office. However, Council and staff were provided correspondence received by Planning Services prior to tonight's meeting from the following agencies concerning the application: Bell Canada, Hydro One, County of Simcoe, Canada Post, and In Services. As well, Your Worship, members of the public may provide comment or register their interest regarding this item during this meeting or up until Council makes a decision by contacting the Clerk's office.
Thank you, Ms. Thoma. We'll now hear from Stephen Montgomery, Supervisor of Development Acceleration, who will provide a high-level summary of the planning context of the application.
Thank you. Mayor, Deputy Mayor, members of Council, staff, and the public. The purpose of this public meeting is to consider a proposed draft plan of subdivision, official plan amendment, and zoning bylaw amendment application for the subject lands, which are known municipally as 6225 Yonge Street, located in the settlement area of Churchill. Next slide, please. The purpose of the applications is a proposal to permit a 42-lot single detached residential subdivision, inside of which would be located 2 public roads, a public park, a stormwater management pond is also part of the development, and a commercial block fronting onto Yonge Street. An official plan amendment is proposed there's a proposal to redesignate the subject lands to allow 7.43 units per net residential density, whereas currently the official plan says the net density shall be about 2.5 units per net hectare, but subject to a hydrogeological study to confirm the net density. And also the official plan amendment proposes to expand the existing hamlet commercial designation on the subject lands to allow an extended proposed commercial block fronting Yonge Street. Also, a zoning bylaw amendment is proposed to rezone the lands to permit the development from the current zoning, which is agricultural general or AG zone, to residential 1 exception zone, commercial village or CV zone, and open space or OS zone. Next slide, please. The area shown with striped diagonal blue lines is the area proposed for the 42 lots, the proposed public park, the proposed commercial block, and the proposed public streets. The balance of the property is, the remainder of the property that isn't striped is outside of the settlement area of Churchill and would not be able to be developed unless Council, through the Municipal Comprehensive Review MCR process, were to agree in a future meeting to expand the settlement area of Churchill. Next slide, please. So this is the official plan, Schedule B8 for Churchill. The black line is the settlement area boundary in the official plan, which corresponds to the area that was diagonal lined on the previous slide where the 42 lots are proposed. The red area is the hamlet commercial area, which is, as mentioned, proposed to be expanded to allow the commercial block on Yonge, and the balance of the site is the yellow is hamlet residential. Outside of the settlement area, the lands are designated agricultural and key natural heritage and key hydrologic features. There's also an orange line there, which is the hazard land overlay, and the Nottawasaga Valley Conservation Authority has been circulated the plans to review the development as it would relate to these hazard lands to the south and setbacks to the existing water course through the studies that have been submitted. Next slide. This is the draft plan of subdivision that's been submitted. The applicant will provide more details in their presentation, but basically there's 2 internal local streets that are proposed off of Killarney Beach Road, 42 single detached dwelling lots. A park block is proposed in the south, that's block 44, would be within the settlement area boundary. The other park block would be outside and would not be part of this subdivision in terms of parkland dedication. There's also a stormwater management pond proposed, a commercial block, which is block 43 on Yonge Street. And of course, there's a road widening that would be required from Yonge, because Yonge is a county road, so that's included. And the balance is shown as future development blocks. And there's also a dashed outline of what's called natural heritage system limits of development, which is a line that's being reviewed by the NVCA currently in terms of potential limits of future development. But again, The area that's shown as future development, and obviously the natural heritage system couldn't be developed, but the area shown as future development would only be able to be developed if, through the municipal comprehensive review process, council were to make a decision to expand the Churchill settlement boundary, which does not allow development in those locations currently because they're designated agricultural. Next slide, please. So staff are reviewing this application in terms of the provincial policy statement, the growth plan, county official plan, the town official plan, the zoning bylaw. Preliminary comments on these policy documents are found in attachment 5 to staff report DSR 12223, which is the policy review. Next slide. Comments received so far from agencies included Bell Canada and Canada Post. They have no objections and standard conditions. Hydro One has no concerns. In Services has technical comments on the functional servicing and the geotechnical reports. They have requirements, for example, for water main looping inside the subdivision and additional comments that would be dealt with through detailed engineering design. The County of Simcoe has also given comments respecting waste collection, the proposed 2024 intersection improvements of Killarney Beach Road and Yonge, a request for a local street entrance to the commercial block through the local roads rather than directly off Yonge Street only. And also they mentioned statements about the county setback bylaw requirements and the required road widenings. We also have received public comments just today respecting concerns about the impact of the development on local wells, the reduction of the lot sizes from 1,400 meters to 900 meters squared, but still proposing the septic systems, concerns about the heritage home, and also concerns about the development block, the uses that would be proposed and the impacts on adjacent properties. Next slide, please. So again, the applicant will provide further details in their presentation, but in terms of next steps, staff will review and consider all comments received and report back to council at a future council meeting, recommending whether this proposed subdivision, official plan amendment, and zoning bylaw amendment should be approved. Notice would be provided respecting when this report is returning to council for consideration to all those who requested notification and or submitted written correspondence for this public meeting, and that includes written correspondence on getinvolvedinnisfil.ca website as well. In terms of the process, the official plan amendment would, if this went ahead, the official plan amendment would first be approved by town council, and then it would have to go to the County of Simcoe because the County of Simcoe is the approval authority for amendments to our official plan. Subsequently, the zoning bylaw amendment and the subdivision would be conditionally approved on the county approval of the official plan amendment. And also for reference, site plan control would also be required, which is a staff-administered process for the commercial block. And once the subdivision was draft approved with conditions by staff, it would proceed through detailed engineering design. Next slide. Darren Ding is the planner on this file, and his contact information is listed above. And this information is also in the public notice. So Darren can be contacted as well as the planner for any questions or comments from the public or council. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Montgomery. We'll now hear from Cameron McCoy of Bellery Group. I probably said that wrong. I'm sorry, Cameron. On behalf of the applicant, who will provide further context to the application. Whenever you're ready.
Hi, good evening, Your Worship. Actually, my name is Mark Jacobs. I'm the senior planner, and I will be doing the presentation on behalf of my colleague Cameron. Thank you, Your Worship. Good evening, members of council and members of the public. Thank you so much for being here tonight to provide any input that you might have on our proposed development. As Stephen noted, we're proposing a residential subdivision consisting of 42 single detached lots located at 6225 Yonge Street. Next slide, please. Just to go over my presentation, I'll provide a bit of an introduction, go over the site, outline some aspects of the development proposal. I get into a little bit of the heritage building that's on the property, review the planning applications that we submitted, and then be available to answer any questions that council and committee might have. Next slide, please. So we're here on behalf of the owner, Delray Developments. And then we've compiled a team of consultants who have worked with us to prepare the applications. We've submitted a number of reports related to the planning rationale, engineering, transportation, geotechnical, hydrogeological, natural heritage, and noise. And these are the consultants that had prepared those reports. Next slide, please. So as was noted, the subject site, or the property is located at the southeast corner of Killarney Beach Road and Yonge Street. The overall property is about 40 hectares in size. Our development application only is within a portion of that side, of the overall property. Next slide, please. So this slide gives an idea of what the area of the development proposal is within the subject property. And as Stephen noted, it is the portion that is currently within the Churchill settlement area boundary. And just to give a bit more context in terms of where the site's located, it's located almost across the street from the Churchill Downs subdivision, which is currently under construction at the moment for estate lots. Next slide, please. So just some pictures of the surrounding lands, like as you guys are familiar with the area, primarily agricultural lands, and then to the north and to the west, there are some rural residential dwellings associated with the hamlet of Churchill. Next slide, please. This slide provides just to give an overview of the subject site and the property in relation to some of the community facilities in the area. The Churchill Community Center and the Innisfil Library are located within proximity to the subject site, and in terms of the town and their placemaking, the site is close to these facilities. There's also the local park nearby, and in addition, which I'll get to in a moment, but our application is proposing another public park within our proposed subdivision. Next slide, please. So here's another image of our proposed draft plan of subdivision. As noted, 42 residential lots containing single detached dwellings. Each lot will have a minimum of 18 meters frontage or 900 square meters. They will all be serviced through municipal water, but will have private septic systems. We are proposing tertiary treatment septic systems. This is allows for a little bit more efficiency in terms of handling the sanitary from each dwelling, which allows us to have slightly smaller lots than what would be typical in terms of the residential one zoning, which are a minimum 1,400 square meters. In addition to the lots, we have two public streets being proposed, Street A and Street B, which would end in, access would be from Killarney Beach Road, and both streets would terminate in cul-de-sacs. These are temporary in case should there ever be a settlement area expansion permitted for the adjacent parts of the property. This would facilitate future access through the proposed subdivision. There's also a future roadblock on the east side, which could facilitate future road to the east should a settlement area expansion be approved. As also part of our proposal, there's a 0.72 hectare commercial block along Yonge Street. We are proposing to expand that as part of the official plan amendment application, and this to sort of have a larger commercial block, and as well to make sure all the frontage that is on Yonge Street, any access is minimized to one access, rather than having multiple commercial blocks or residential lots fronting Yonge Street. The one block allows for just the single access. We've reviewed the county's comments. We're going to have discussions with them in terms of access from the local street. But at this time, we're proposing access to the commercial block from Yonge Street. We also have a public park block that's 0.35 hectares in size. That's within the current settlement area. We're showing another park block just to the south, and that would allow for an expansion of that park should the settlement area boundary be expanded in the future. We're also proposing a stormwater management pond that would handle stormwater from this subject site in the roads. And we've located in an area that is, while currently outside the settlement area, it's in the most efficient place in terms of being able to, sort of future-proof not only the subject site, but the potential for settlement area expansion. And we've had discussions with town engineering staff, and they've accepted this location, provided we have the block shown, and then through the detailed design and registration of a subdivision, we'd work on easements in order to convey those stormwater flows from the proposed subdivision to the pond. And next slide, please. As Stephen noted, the balance of the subject site that is north and east of the creek is future development subject to settlement area boundary expansion. This has been set aside for the future while also protecting the balance of the lands south of the creek as natural heritage. Next slide, please. In terms of the heritage building, the subject site is listed under in the town's heritage register. The property is not designated, just listed, but it has been identified as a property of significance and value. A report that was prepared back in 2021 identified the property as a landmark, and so we are, working with the owner and coming up with opportunities on how we can preserve the building on with the development. We're going a number of options, whether it's retaining the building in situ, as in where it's currently located, and then looking at ways that we could adjust the draft plan to accommodate that, or potentially relocate the building to one of our proposed lots and have it readapted as a future residential dwelling, or have it as a possible building on the commercial block. These are a number of options that we are considering. The owner is open to one of these options, subject to a structural assessment to determine if the building could be moved, and a heritage impact assessment as well, which we are working on preparing and will be submitted in the future. And then there is also a special heritage committee meeting tomorrow that will be where this building will be a subject of the meeting. And as I noted, we'll be doing the HIA, and which will present findings after doing an evaluation of the heritage merits of the building and the property. Next slide. And just to reiterate the development applications that are being proposed, zoning bylaw amendment was submitted to rezone the lands to permit the residential uses. The R1 zone is being proposed with exceptions to reduce the minimum lot area from 1,400 to 900 square meters. There are, and as well as to adjust the exterior side yard setback from 6 meters to 3 meters. There's no changes to the proposed building heights. We are keeping the heights at 9 meters, which would accommodate 2-story buildings. Overall, we're expecting that these lots would accommodate about 2,500 square foot dwellings. The zoning application also rezones the area that proposed for commercial to a commercial village zone in line with the official plan, as well as the park and stormwater management pond zone to open space. The official plan amendment application, as noted by Stephen, is to increase the density from 2.5 units per hectare to 7.43 units per hectare. This is based on the hydrogeological report that Palmer Engineering has completed in support of this proposed density with the use of the tertiary treatment systems for the private septic systems. And then the OPA also expands the hamlet boundary to the south. And then the draft plan subdivision application would facilitate the creation of the residential lots, the commercial block, park block, roads, and swim pond. Next slide, please. And yeah, that's my presentation. Be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jacobs. I'm going to go to council for questions. Before I do that, I just wanted to let everyone know that the ward councillor is Councillor Fred Drodge. Councillor Drodge had to participate virtually this evening, and with the issues that we had earlier, he's unable to put his mic on. So he's hearing all of the comments, and he wanted me to let you know that he will put his comments in writing and send them in to the town. So that's how we're going to handle that for this evening, and I apologize to Councillor Drodge for the technical issues. Council, questions or comments? Councillor Ices.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a question with regards to the septic systems. I'm not familiar with that design. What makes it so that septic can be used in a smaller lot?
Sure, yeah, through Madam Mayor. I'm not going to make myself a septic system expert either, but basically a more traditional septic system would have your standard bed and then a backup bed. This would allow for just one, and it just be able to process the effluent a little bit in a more efficient manner. The details of the tertiary system that is proposed are available in our functional servicing report. So if you have an opportunity, I can, you can look at that and find more details. But it does allow for, more efficient lot usage. So
Other questions from members of council? Councillor Zanella.
Thank you, Your Worship. What are the size of the lots?
Through Your Worship, the size of the lots start at a minimum of 900 square meters, and they go up to, I believe the largest one is about 2,500 square meters. It's a corner lot, so obviously it's going to be a little bit bigger, but they all have minimum 18-meter frontages, and for the proposed R1 zoning that we're requesting, that minimum lot frontage is 17 meters, so we're slightly larger than that minimum lot frontage, but as noted, our lot area is less than the 1,400 that's required for lots that are serviced through municipal water and private septic systems.
Thank you.
Councillor Waters.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm all for density. I like building, up and not out. So that I do like about the plan, but my concern is, along with Councillor Ices, is the septic systems on such small lots. Now, it sounds like you've taken that into consideration, but I'm still quite concerned. On the other side of Yonge Street, you have estate lots, which allow for the traditional septic systems. On this one here, I'm a bit concerned of putting that many, and considering that you're also looking at expanding, that there's other areas around it, so you're looking at expanding that area with, I assume, more septic systems. And what disturbs me the most is the fact that we have a creek, which is at a lower elevation than all the lots. And so that effluent, if it's not as efficient, is going to end up down in that creek. So my first question is there any pre-monitoring of water quality at the site right now, so that we have a baseline, so that if at some point in time you come back and want to increase the size of the subdivision, that we can take a look to see what type of impact those septic systems are having on the water quality? Because we used to have something called a conservation authority, which the purview of pollution does not fall in their bailiwick anymore. So I'm not too sure who does that in terms of water quality. So my first question is around, are you doing any monitoring for water quality at that site?
Through Your Worship, the hydrogeological report had, we had done some drilling and groundwater monitoring. We had set samples that would set a baseline, as you said, for what is the current analysis and of the groundwater and the soil. So that is in the hydrogeological report as a baseline as it stands today. And so in the future, like typically under draft plan conditions, there's a well monitoring program that speaks more to like existing wells and the effects of development on the existing wells, but there are programs associated with that through the draft plan approval and conditions that ensure that there is continuing monitoring of the wells and the groundwater. Okay,
I would think that most of the development in Churchill is north and west of the subdivision, which is the elevation is higher. So yeah. I'm not too sure the wells. It would be more the natural creek that runs through there, and any settlement areas west of that was my first concern. So nice to see that you have some monitoring going on, so that we do have baseline, so we have an intelligent way of deciding whether or not this proposed development gets to expand later on if settlement boundaries change. My second question is there a buffer area around that creek, and is it what's the minimum, and have you expanded that buffer area to accommodate the fact that you're going to have that water flows downhill, and so does sewage? So in terms of providing protection for uncontrolled spills, leaching from septic systems.
Yeah, through Your Worship, the natural heritage investigation that was submitted had reviewed the creek and all other natural heritage features that are on the entire property, and applied any necessary buffers based on each individual feature. So the water course would have had a 15-meter buffer, so that is applied already onto it. So because where the current proposal is north of the creek, it's well beyond those existing buffers. But I do know the stormwater management pond is further beside the creek, but it itself is outside of those buffers, save for a small portion where the outfall from the pond to the creek.
Right.
But, getting it, if we jump ahead, if a salmon area boundary expansion was approved and there was a future development application, these buffers would be reviewed again in more detail as well and evaluated, and make sure that all appropriate natural heritage features and their buffers are outlined and respected.
Yeah, my main reason for asking that is because the creek is at a much lower level than the subdivision, and that your stormwater management pond is at the south end, which water flows downhill, so it's a good place to be. But with the climate change and the excessive rains that we get, that if that stormwater management pond were ever to overflow, that excess water would then end up in the creek. And usually it's not as clean as we would like it to be. So it would be nice to be able to consider a larger buffers area or some way of containing that type of situation that might happen.
Yeah, through your worship, I think, if we, when we get down to detailed engineering designs, when we're looking at deep designs of the stormwater management pond in terms of sizing and quality control and quantity control, I think those things can be looked at during the detailed design. And so if there are concerns with the size of it, right now we're already anticipating it to be a larger pond than what's currently needed with the application before you today, because, anticipating if there is future development that we want to accommodate that stormwater flow to that pond. But I would speak with engineering staff and, in terms of how the pond size and design can be able to handle climate change, and if the potential for it to be larger, I think that would be, we can review it now, and when we get to detailed design, those can be incorporated into that design at that time.
Okay, thank you. And one final question. The commercial area, are you planning on putting the parking at the front or at the back of the commercial buildings that are there, in terms of creating, because it is a hamlet feel, and some of the buildings are up front along Yonge Street, that it wouldn't be nice to be able to continue that hamlet feel there? So putting the parking at the back would be something that would be, I think would look more appropriate.
Through your worship, I do. That's a great comment. I think that'd be a great idea as well. We're not at that stage yet. Once we get to the site plan stage for the commercial block, that's something we can look at. I do want to note that the County of Simcoe has provided in their comments, they note a certain setback from the Yonge Street right-of-way for the buildings. I don't have the exact number offhand. It's 15 or 18 meters, which is a pretty large setback. So if the county were amenable to reducing that to have more of a, buildings closer to Yonge Street, have a more animated pedestrian feel and have parking at the back, that's something we can look at. Or even if it's to the south, like want to be cognizant of having parking at the rear, that would be backing onto residential backyards as well. So there's a balance to be made, I guess. And, as I said, it's time we're not at that stage yet. When we get to site plan approval, that is something we will definitely take into consideration and have further discussions with the town and the county.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments? Councillor Saunders.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I was looking at the plans. You only have one single access coming in off of Killarney Beach Road, right?
That is correct.
What's going to happen to the residents if that ever gets blocked off by emergency vehicles or anything like that, and you need to evacuate all the other residents?
At this time, there's just the single access. If we're open, if comments from emergency services or anyone from the town brings that up, if there needs to be an emergency access route from one of the cul-de-sac, the western cul-de-sac, we'd be amenable to putting in some sort of emergency access there. The reason we only have the one access is because the county wasn't allowing new access from Yonge Street. And if there were ever a future intersection along Yonge Street, their preference would be that it would align with the Churchill Downs subdivision in terms of having like a road access. So if there was a salmon area boundary expansion, and I know I keep bringing that up, but the plan would have another access on Yonge Street opposite the the Churchill Downs subdivision. So that would be another access should the Killarney Beach Road access be blocked for whatever reason.
Go ahead, Councillor.
Sorry, thank you. And have you taken into account what the subdivision, the impact it's going to have on the residents' wells in the area? Have you done like water table levels and stuff like that? Because I tell you right now, all those residents behind you are going to ask you the same question.
Yeah, and through your worship, as to my previous comments to Councillor Waters, as part of the condition of draft plan approval, there's a well monitoring program that's going to be implemented. And so they take those baselines of what are the current water levels in the existing wells in the area that would be impacted. And, you know, as the development progresses and construction progresses, the consultants will monitor those wells, those levels, and if there are any impacts, and then there would be a program in place that would mitigate those impacts. So there is a program that would be required to be done. As was also noted, these are, you know, down in elevation, but nonetheless, there is a well monitoring program that would be a condition of draft plan approval. And, you know, town staff can certainly speak to that as well.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? I have a couple for Mr. Montgomery and then a couple for you, Mr. Jacobs. So, Mr. Montgomery, the 0.35 hectares of parkland dedication which is like half the park shown on the illustration, does that meet the requirements of the town for parkland dedication?
To your worship, it's actually a slight over-dedication for the 42 lots. It's a slight over-dedication. They are showing another park block outside of the development, but it's outside the development area. So the 0.35 is within the scale of what we would call a parkette, basically. And it is slight, I think we require for density, this is a relatively low density development. It's not, once you get into, you know, full services with smaller lots, you get into the 1 hectare per 300 for parkland. This is at about 5%, so, and 2% for commercial. So when we do the math on that, it's a slight over dedication.
Thank you. And the stormwater pond outside of the settlement area, is that common to have a settlement area or to have a stormwater pond that's not inside the settlement area?
The one example I can think of is Sleeping Lion does have a stormwater management pond outside of the limits of Elcona on the south side of the 6th line. So it has happened. Its infrastructure can technically go outside of a settlement boundary.
Thank you. Mr. Jacob, the drawings here, are they been done in recognition of the county's widening of County Road 4 and the redevelopment of that intersection next spring?
Through your worship, we do have a road widening block that's between Yonge Street and the commercial block. It's about a 5-meter wide strip of land that's parallel to Yonge Street, which would account for the county's 45-meter right-of-way for Yonge Street. So currently, I believe the right-of-way as it exists today is 35 meters. So we've given 5 meters on our side to give it, to allow for the ultimate 45 meters. You know, should lands on the west side be developed, they'd be responsible for providing the balance of the road widening to get to that ultimate 45 meters.
So I believe they've done detailed design, so they should be able to tell you exactly.
Well, we do on our survey, we know where the center line of the right-of-way is, or the center line of the road. So we measure 22.5 meters from that center line onto our property, and that gives us, and from where the property line currently exists to that 22.5 meters, it's 5 meters. So we are providing that's shown as a block on the draft plan of subdivision for the purpose of the road widening and dedication to the county for Yonge Street.
Okay, I don't want to argue, but some of the properties on the west are built right to the lot line. So there's been no way for them to give any frontage on that side. But I know that staff are taking down these comments and will address that. So that's good. So tertiary systems are typically raised beds. They have that kind of hump in the front. I'm sorry I didn't read the technical report. Is it proposed for the front or the backyard of the home?
Your worship, they're at the back of the yard. So you'd have the building along the front and with a driveway and garage, and the back would be the tile bed, and then with the tertiary system in the back.
So would there still be room for a deck? Typically what we've seen before when we do septic inspections, that sometimes people build infrastructure or decks over top of their systems. And that leads a little bit into a question Councillor Drodge texted. And he wanted to know if these septic systems require yearly maintenance. And if yes, do they have to have agreements with the septic inspectors to service them?
There would be room for inspecting and servicing the septic systems. In terms of having decks, and we've accounted in our lot size an area for a rear yard amenity space. So we've in our functional servicing report, there's a diagram that shows what a typical lot would look like with the septic bed, where the dwelling is based on the setbacks, side yard setbacks, front yard setbacks, and then there is an area that is between the dwelling and the septic area that can be utilized as a rear yard amenity space, so a deck, a pool perhaps, but that is taken into account when these lots are sized with this system.
Thank you. I know you're going to be visiting the Heritage Committee, so I won't dwell on the Sinclair House at this time, but I will tell you we haven't had much luck with moving heritage homes. If you just drive down Innisfil Beach Road, you'll see one that's been sitting there for 5 years, 10 years. So still up on blocks. So that's just another comment. And then my final comment is in regards with the potential expansion of the settlement area. So I sit on county council, the deputy sits on county council. We went through the MCR process there. Your company was there asking for the settlement area expansion and explaining what it was that you wanted to develop in that area. And I'm quite certain I heard you say that was bringing a sanitary line up to that corner. So they weren't going to be on septics. There was going to be a sanitary sewer system.
Yes, Your Worship, you're correct. We've submitted a settlement area boundary expansion, which you've probably seen the request. There's been no decisions made on any expansion at this time. OPA 7 is still stuck at the province. But yeah, part of that was on the basis of the town's 2018 master servicing plan, which does show a sanitary sewer being extended to the hamlet of Churchill. And so it would be tied into that. So any expansion, like if there were expansion and there's a sanitary sewer expanded to service the hamlet of Churchill, those would be based on full municipal services utilizing the sanitary sewer that would be extended, as well as the existing municipal water. And then in terms of the proposed subdivision that's before you today, we've kept it on the partial services, but should there be a sanitary sewer extended to the hamlet, there could be the opportunity to extend that into the proposed subdivision as well and connect them. But that's not subject to the application today.
No.
So that's...
Thank you for allowing me to speculate into the future. I did have one more, sorry. So most of Churchill is on municipal water system. So these well tests, will they be done? I guess it's not fair to ask because In-Services is not here, but we have municipal wells in Churchill. And would they also be monitored to make sure that there was no impact on our municipal wells during the construction? And I see notes being written, and I don't need an answer today. We can ask for that answer later. And that's all I had. Anyone else have any other questions? Councillor Waters.
Considering the expansion that the mayor just brought up, why wouldn't you have considered a central, community-based septic system, considering that we may end up having wastewater treatment lines coming down that way? So I'm just kind of curious. And that way, they would all be easily tied in at a future date when that expansion happened, if that was going to be on wastewater as well. So I'm just kind of curious why you didn't go to a small community-based septic system as opposed to individual sites, which seems much more expensive to go that route, but you're the builder.
Through your worship, No, a great point. And, we did consider a communal system. It was just the owner moving forward with it. It was their preference for the individual septics rather than a communal system. So that was more of a preference from the owner.
And I would argue, from my perspective, Councillor Waters, better for the town as well. Mm-hmm. Residential septic systems, individual ones, are owned and operated by the resident. Communal septic systems, if they break or become, it's the town, usually the town ends up on the hook for operating that system. And then I had one other from Councillor Drodge. He said, just to clarify, so all those homes, if sanitary sewer came down, would have to hook up and pay additional fees?
They would not have to hook up, but I mean, it's, in terms of extending that sewer line or the sanitary sewer down, I don't know who,
yeah.
It could be a town cost.
That's actually an in-services question, so we'll clarify that as well. Yeah. Thank you. Anyone else? Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship. The one question I do have with the technical report, I didn't get a chance to read it, but if you could forward it to council just so we have a better understanding. Is it a bacterial based? Is it a biofilter? Or is it the polyethylene with the tubing and whatnot? Because I mean, the various standards that come with each individual tertiary septic system have its own plus and minuses, right? So we're looking to see what the impacts would be and what the effects of the long term should any issues arise. For example, like the biofilters have the absorbent film with the polyethylene. What happens if they crack, break, dry out? Like there's other effects that go beyond just wastewater with this. So I'd like to be able to get a better understanding of what's going into the property so that we can prepare for the future.
Through your worship, I believe it's biofilter.
And you do have a copy of the technical report. It was sent to you today by Mr. Jacobs, sent you a copy of that. Thank you. Okay, so if there's no other questions for Mr. Jacobs, thank you very much.
Thank you
for your presentation. We'll now hear from members of the public who have questions regarding this item. I understand, sorry, I was going to call you Councillor Toma. Clerk Toma, have we had anybody sign up on the live stream to speak? I guess we can't anyway because we have no...
Thank you, Worship. And actually, we did not have anybody sign up for that this evening. However, we did receive some correspondence that came in just before the meeting started that will be forwarded to Council later this evening or tomorrow morning from Barbara Calrose.
Thank you. Thank you for that. So now we'll go to people who are in attendance here at Town Hall to come forward to the podium. If you'd please state your name for the record. And as a reminder to keep your remarks, first set of remarks anyway, to 5 minutes until everybody's had an opportunity, and then you're more than welcome to come up an additional time. After all the members of the public have spoken, I will ask if any person needs any more time. So we'll start with the first person on the list, Mr. Steve Woods. Please come forward. There's a mic right there, Mr. Woods.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Innisfil. Myself and my wife are new to the area. We're in the process of moving from Scarborough. And as we mentioned that we're moving, all of our neighbors kind of sort of said, wow, Innisfil, such a nice place, wonderful, lots of farmland. They can tell the area they're getting into when they're driving up, just the change of pace, so much slower, so much nicer. When we moved, or as we are moving, we still haven't sold yet, but we're here now anyway. We spent a lot of time in our old house. We were there 30 years, and we've moved from an old community with lots of old houses, lots of old trees, lots of walkable stuff, to one that has become kind of gentrified, a lot of change, a lot of subdividing of lots, a lot of the downtown Toronto ideas are getting pushed out into Scarborough and even the other areas. And I guess my biggest concern with sort of this kind of thing is just the creep that happens. Toronto is sort of the hub of Ontario, whether we like it or not, and the GTA has become, a lot of the other areas. And it's sort of a concern that not that development happens, but that development happens kind of at an accelerated rate that isn't planned. In learning about the history, we did look at sort of an interesting book. I don't know if you guys are familiar with it, but this is the Innisfil Township Centennial, a record of 100 years of progress. It's dated 1951. It's a fantastic book, and it taught me a lot of interesting stuff. What amazed me looking through is the history is preserved, a lot of it, through careful planning. The oldest part of Churchill, I believe, which is where this development takes place, of course, has preserved the oldest structure, the old general store. Yes, it's now houses, but I mean, the structure's still there. Many older homes still exist, as does the agricultural field of Churchill. And the farm that will no longer be if this proposed development goes through is known in this book as the Rosebank Farm. It was founded by Richard Boys in the later 1800s. One of the earliest settlers, and he built that house, according to this 1951 book, and I quote, later in Richard Boyle's life, built a brick house, still standing on the northwest corner of the farm in Churchill. That was in 1951. It's still standing today, but as we know, the proposal is to do something with it. Whether we can move it or not, I don't know, but my concern is anytime you try and change something significant like that, it is going to be a concern. Our place, the Innisfil official plan, is quite a document, and in my opinion, and trust me, I reviewed both Toronto and Scarborough's official plans, is well thought out. My biggest concern is the inability to actually use it and keep to it, especially with the Ontario government sort of proposing some of the 2020 Greater Horseshoe Plan, talking about the growth plan. They talk about the Simcoe sub-areas specifically as they clear. They want to make it part of the suburban sprawl of downtown Toronto. I really, really believe that. They specifically mention Simcoe as a more livable, compact, complete urban structure with good design and built form that will support the achievement of economic and environmental benefits. But does Churchill and Innisfil really want a complete urban structure outside of what you guys are planning for the orbit area? We've all seen what the old OMB, the Ontario Municipal Board, did to override local plans. Now the oversight has been given even more power through this Ontario Housing Supply Action Plan, basically allowing the province to override multiple decisions where it deems fit. But back to our place. One of the three main goals of this plan is to grow while keeping our small town feel. Awesome, worthwhile goal, and one I endorse. And I think, Mayor Dolan, you were quoted as having the orbit will allow more traditional neighborhoods to stay traditional neighborhoods. The city of Vaughan in 1980, which wasn't that long ago, was 27,000 people. Today it's 350,000 people. And I think it's fair to say we don't want to look like Vaughan. I completely agree with what you're doing. And so the biggest concern with what we're seeing here is we're already changing the official plan. We're already changing the density of these areas. We're 3 times the housing density being proposed by this. Again, I'm not against development. I'm not against any of that. But I just want it to make sure that it fits with what you guys have already done a lot of the work on. While we're talking about new commercial on Yonge Street, where the last commercial was turned into housing, we're talking about turning agriculture into residential. Again, I know it's going to happen. It's happened in Mississauga. It's happened in Vaughan. It's happened in all of the GTA. It's slowly creeping. It's up to us to try and do what we can. I know it's fighting against the upstream, and I know that there's a better way of doing this. I'm not against development, and I'm all for putting the proper housing in, putting the proper community base. But once you change it, once you do go that way, it's gone. You can't say, well, the rest of the proposal can't be this higher density. You've set the precedent. You can't put the density back, and you can't rebuild the old boys' house if
Thank
it
you,
is not being moved.
Mr. Wood. You've been about 8 minutes, so if you don't mind.
Sorry.
It's okay. I'd love to hear more. I hope I
I'm
haven't
actually
offended anybody in Vaughan. And we have about 8 or 9 other books that you can purchase right here at Town
Awesome.
Hall.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next is Krista Moore.
Thank you, Your Worship. I will be much quicker. My name is Krista Moore. I'm also a new resident and the minister at Churchill United, one of the 2 churches in the area. My only concern, we would more than welcome, obviously, new residents to the area and have some revitalization, some life in Churchill, and that would be very positive. My only concern is traffic and just the safety of residents, safety of new pedestrians as well as the old pedestrians that are already here. Just wondering what the plans would be for a possible safety crosswalk intersection with lights. At this moment on Yonge Street, I understand it is a county road, but is there any work for the developer's perspective in working with the county or the city, the town of Innisfil, to ensure safety for pedestrians? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Did you want to respond to that now, Mr. Montgomery, or did you want to wait and do it in the report? Sorry, go ahead, Brandon.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to point out that the applicant, as part of the complete application, did provide a traffic impact study. The town will be working with the county and going through technical comments, and that will be reported on as part of the technical report that comes in the future.
Thank you, and I understand that the original design from the county was not to signalize that intersection, but that through comments they're re-looking at it. Am I correct?
All right. To Your Worship, that is correct. If you look at the traffic report for this subdivision, the developer is recommending by 2036 traffic signalization.
Next is Diane Hogarth.
Your Worship, Deputy Mayor, councillors, thank you for having this meeting. I've been a resident of Churchill for 37 years. The attraction to Churchill was because it was quiet, quaint, undisturbed hamlet of agricultural origin with farms and homelands on large lots and a small population. It's been quite a scenic ride. On to my concerns, however. One of the concerns is allowing for subdivisions is that they conform to the present community to the extent possible. I'm not sure that the designs of this proposed subdivision would do that. The Churchill Downs project across the street, known affectionately by some as the mudslide, which has been ongoing since 2009, has been delayed in part because of the lack of water serving capacity, allowing for only 17 homes to be built. Others, to my knowledge, are on hold. This being the case, and correct me if it's not the case, I don't have an update on that, but how would it be possible, if this was the case, to approve an additional 42 homes to be built in a subdivision across the street? My second concern is the capacity of the South Innisfil Creek drain, of which I'm intimately acquainted, which is, excuse me, a built-up subdivision that is described would have a great impact on the drain capacity. And I don't know where all of that stands at this point in time, and if that project would have to be altered to accommodate this type of a subdivision as well. My third concern is that a number of factors within the official plan for increasing density don't actually apply to this project, as there is no industry, not even a gas station in the hamlet of Churchill, and no plan to increase industry in this area, except for perhaps that commercial bit that's being talked about. And hopefully there would not be access to it from Yonge Street, Highway 11, because it would be a disaster traffic-wise. A fourth concern is the timing of the construction of this subdivision relative to the planned widening of Highway 11. If the highway comes first, then the plan would have to be altered, perhaps redesigned. If the subdivision, if both of them came before the highway widening, then the sidewalks and the streetlights and all of that would have to be destroyed to allow for the highway to be built. So those are my concerns, and perhaps these concerns have been discussed already. I'd be appreciative of further discussion and answers when possible. Oh, also, sorry, I had one more. Yeah, no, I've covered it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Hogarth. Anyone else who's here who'd like to make a comment, ask a question, please feel free to come on up.
I'm kind of a homebody.
Why is my phone talking to me?
Thank you, Your Worship. Good evening, Deputy Mayor, members of council. Usually I come here to extol the virtues of the Heritage Act and trying to keep one more piece of heritage in Innisfil. So I was really excited. I'm glad I got here when I got here to hear that this developer proponent is actually going to talk to the Heritage Committee. Being on the Heritage Committee, hey, I can hardly wait. But that being said, my understanding is that tonight we're talking about land use planning and an application for zoning change. And to me, applications for zoning changes, land use planning, are based in the provincial planning statement and the Planning Act. Now, I'm barely literate when it comes to the Ontario Heritage Act, and those two pieces are murky at best for me. But my understanding is both of those pieces of legislation protect agricultural land. And what you are doing here and what we are considering here is changing agricultural land to residential land. And I thought, with all of the planning that the town has done, that density, population growth was to be in centers of with services, full services, and that was the whole concept behind the orbit. And so why in the world are we ever even considering putting in 42 probably unaffordable houses in an unsustainable community without full servicing, a gas station, a grocery store, or a drugstore, or access to medical, and you're really lucky if you can hop the GO bus as it goes by. That's not my idea of what I thought Innisfil was planning or how Innisfil was planning to grow. And there are lots of fields that are within those settlement areas of Elkona and identified for the orbit that are there to build. And you know that you always hear for every zoning application or building application, you talk about density, accommodating population growth targets. We hear about all of this all the time. And here we are seriously considering an application to zone agricultural land in a community that's unsustainable for that population growth. It doesn't make sense to me. You know, we're looking at demolishing a heritage farm, one that has been a landmark to travelers since the early 1800s. And we're going to put in a strip mall and 42 unaffordable houses in a hamlet. I think we really need to step back and have a look at the principles of the Planning Act and the policy statement and kind of relook at this whole thing. Anyway, I also feel very, very empathetic to the individuals who have properties and live on Yonge Street in that community. It's probably not wise to have that second glass of wine and go out for a walk in the evening because your front door, you might get clipped by the time the widening happenings. I just really hope that council will look behind and look beyond the issue of population growth and this housing crisis that we keep hearing about. Build, build, build. It's not the equivalent of build anything anywhere for a profit. It's about building communities, and it's building within a sustainable plan that you have. So please, I look forward to discussions at the Heritage Committee, and please reconsider the whole picture of how this fits in. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Crawford. Next, anyone else want to speak? Please come forward.
Hello.
Welcome.
Thank you for hearing me. I live at 2144 Killarney Beach Road. We've lived here for 23 years. As this is currently drawn, this proposal, this roadway, this single roadway that is an entrance into the subdivision, opens up onto our property. Nowhere else anywhere in Innisfil can I think of a subdivision opening up to someone's driveway. They've got a single entrance into here, so they're not opening up to Yonge Street, they're opening it up to homes. So we have a threat to our wells because of this subdivision, which you can come to my house anytime you want. We get the best tasting water you're gonna have anywhere. And then on top of that, you're now gonna have all these 42 houses coming out. We've already gotten to the point where, to try, as has been addressed, to try and cross Yonge Street to take the dog for a walk, you're taking your life in your hands. And now you're making it so now we're not even gonna be able to get off our driveways. And it's not just me. There's our neighbors beside us. There's road allowances that were parts of the original plan for Churchill. 4 doors on either side of us. Neither one of those is part of this. You've got the Wellington Street drawn on here, but that's not where they've got the road going to. So to me, make that make sense when it's not happening in any other subdivision. So I guess that's about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Could I ask you to state your name for the record, please?
Oh, sorry. Michelle Wilson.
Thank you, Michelle. Next up, please come forward.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. I've been a resident of Churchill for over 20 years, and my main concern is the water quality, whether the residents around this new proposed new subdivision are going to have to hook up to municipal water, municipal sewer, and what the impact on our water table is going to be with this proposed subdivision. My second question is, the gentleman here mentioned a program that if there's an impact during construction to the local water, what would that program look like?
Thank you. There's nobody here from In-Services tonight, but Brandon, can you help us?
Through you, Madam Mayor. So I just want to differentiate that council at the meeting tonight is Looking at the official plan amendment and the zoning bylaw amendment, we do show the draft plan approval for context, and so that council and the community see what's actually being proposed. And as part of the draft plan approval process, we will have to look at that technically within services, and certainly will more than open to working with the public to help them understand that better. But we need in services as part of that conversation. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just mention it because it was brought up as a
Right,
program,
and we will get you that answer.
Okay.
I mean, I'm certainly no geologist, but I think what they do is they take the measure of your well, like pre-construction, and then make sure that it's the same post-construction. But that's just my layman's answer, so we'll get you a proper answer in the report.
It's just if not, what would that look like? If there is an impact, then what's the program that was mentioned? What would that look like? That's what I'm curious about.
Okay, we'll get you that answer.
Great.
And I'm sorry, I didn't get your name either.
Yeah, it's Janice LeBlanc, Leblanc.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Next up. Thank you. Welcome. Thanks for coming.
My name's Mike Ciccone. My question is, the commercial units, is that going to be on septic and well as well? And if so, how are you fitting the septic systems for all those units on such a small lot versus the residential lots? And how does that affect the residential lots? And also with the wells, if all those homes are on wells and we're higher than they are, then who's guaranteeing our water, regardless of the study that's been done now? Should those commercial units or residential units start using more water per se than what they've accounted for, how do we know that we're not going to be drained of our water? And how do we get more should that happen? That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jacobs. I think the plan is to have these homes on municipal water, not on private wells. Am I right?
Through your worship, yes, that's the plan to be on municipal water. And you know, the comments that are coming in with respect to the existing wells and their water levels and what are the impacts on that. Like that's all done, the well monitoring program is done by the developer. Any impacts are covered by the developer. They're responsible for covering, you know, ensuring that the existing water levels that serve the individual wells of the residents are maintained.
Thank you. Can you answer the question about septic for the commercial property?
Through your worship. The design of the commercial block is not established yet, but yes, it will be on municipal water and private septic as well. It'll be on its own system that would cover the commercial block itself. So in terms of the size of it, it's a balance between how big the septic system needs to be relative to the size of the building, you know, on that lot. So it's sort of, there'll be some back and forth. We start off with a building size with certain uses that are proposed and how much water and sanitary capacity they require. And then that goes into the septic sizing and design. And if there's not enough space for that septic bed or septic system, then we do reduce the size of the building to enable to reduce the septic area to accommodate that. So it's a bit of a give and take, but it would be within the commercial block on its own septic system.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions from members of the public, please? Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Gabriel Ciccone. I live on Killarney. I'm the second one in, basically. So I'm wondering about the ditch drainage. So basically we're being told that we're all going to be getting a bill for this ditch drainage for all the water that goes into that creek. Everything that's agricultural was supposed to be, I think, at a reduced rate compared to any of the homeowners. So if they do put all these homes in, are they going to be, let's say, retroing? Are they going to be paying more, let's say, for the residential homes with all the ditch drainage? Because agricultural is supposed to pay way less, is what I was hearing. Ditch drainage, I guess, has still not even been done. Plus, is there going to be a lot more of an impact on the ditch drainage study that's already being done and costing all the homeowners around the area more money? Because I know that they've already gone way over budget on what they've done with the ditch drainage so far. Also, for them, what's the smallest size that these septic systems can use? Is it being maxed out right now, or is it comfortable for the size that they're using them on, right? I think that's pretty much everything. Thanks.
Thank you. So I'll start with the South Innisfil Creek drain. So we'll get you an answer for that regarding how the benefiting landowners are all billed through our drainage superintendent. His name is Jeremy Ninehouse, and he is not here this evening either. So, but we will get an answer from you. And actually, I think that could probably be in the way of an email versus having any, because it's really quite separate from the planning application. But we will, if you wanted to leave your email contact information with the clerk, we'll get an answer on the South Innisfil Creek drain for you. Thank you. And could we get the spelling of both your last names too, please? We didn't quite catch that. C-I-C-C-O-N-E. Thank you. Please come forward.
Good evening. My name is Fran Fraser. I applaud all of the comments made by my fellow residents. As you can see, we are very concerned about this development, taking away the charm of Innisfil, the impact it will have on the sewer system and the water system that it could have on these residents. As well, we believe in being proactive rather than reactive. I'm quite concerned about this gentleman saying that there will be a program in case there is impact on water, and yet we can't have him speak about what that program is. If there is a program, we should hear about it tonight. And secondly, we haven't heard about a timeline. If this is approved, and I sincerely hope it is not, but if it is approved, what's the timeline for building all of this? Because it will impact decisions made by the existing residents. As you can see, we're very, very concerned about our livelihoods, our love of Innisfil, and I presume your love of Innisfil, or you would not be sitting on this council. It's incredibly important that we take the financial, economic part up to one side, so we listen to the concerns about the love that these people have for this community. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Fraser. Next, please.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Patrick McMillan. I'm a resident at 2082 Killarney Beach Road. My wife and I have been there a short 23 years and quite enjoy this municipality of Churchill, or town of Churchill. I have a few questions. During the comments made earlier regarding a point of reference of soil and groundwater sample taken previously on the proposed development, I'm not certain, but it appears to me that from my recollection, those soil samples may have been taken in a part of the property that would be considered for future development, possibly quite or somewhat to the southeast of the proposed development. So I'm not sure that those samples will give good feedback about the proposed development in the future. That may be, I may be mistaken on those, but from my recollection, when we've seen them taking the samples, that would be my observation. Second question, why is it always prime farmland that's taken for development? This seems to lack, absolute lack of wisdom. Land that was once sought out by early settlers as the choice land for farming and we're going to erase it or repurpose it. Where is the food for all these new people going to continue to come from? We do need places for people to live, but we should select the places we build more carefully, even if it is more difficult. Second question is, will the Killarney Beach Road be widened also? I've seen a previous plan of the town that showed a median being put in the Killarney Beach Road, which to me would indicate the road would have to be widened. And if so, where would they take the land from? Which side of the road, both sides, and how much? And the next question, the proposed development, what would the height of the homes be? We now have new homes on the west side of Churchill, and it's totally changed the character of the landscape when you drive from approaching the town on the west side up the Killarney Beach Road, the fourth line. The homes are quite high on the back side, at least 3 stories high, I think, because they have walkout basements. And so all of us that are on the Killarney Beach Road, our views will be significantly impacted, as well as the character of the whole community. So these are my concerns, as well as many that have already been expressed tonight. Thank you, Council.
Thank you, Mr. McMillan. Any questions that we don't answer this evening, they'll be addressed in the report that comes forward, and you'll have the opportunity to sign up so that you get all of that information sent to you. Welcome, Mr. Campbell.
It's Mr. Rose. My name is David Rose. I live on Highway 89 with my wife Barbara, who has commented earlier on the proposal. My question to council and staff is, who vets the hydrologic report? The report's been drawn up on behalf of the developer, so it may be at arm's length, but it doesn't appear to be particularly at arm's length. I attended the auction sale at Case Sinclair's farm, and I'd never had much opportunity to walk the farm. But that day I walked over a ridge and into the gravel pit that is at the center of the proposed development. Now, one of the reasons that the Greenbelt and the Oak Ridges Moraine were brought into place is because of the gravel deposits that they have in that area, and that massive aquifer under the moraine is the source of groundwater for a tremendous number of municipalities in the Greater Toronto area. So if your staff aren't really paying too much attention to the hydrologic study, take a hard look. Like these, the proponent is suggesting a density that's almost 300% of what you have in your official plan. And you're depending on technology in these upgraded or modified or more highly technical septic beds on very small lots. Well, once the houses are built, once the septic beds are in operation, if they start to fail and leach into your groundwater, it's not a question of monitoring the wells. How do you mitigate? You can't mitigate. The cat's out of the bag. So, is it valid technology for that site? Is it appropriate? I mean, if sewers come along sometime down the road, no problem. But in the short term, I think it's a problem. The density on a site that's potentially gravelly, and it will impact the quality of groundwater in the area of the Churchill community. And then the other question is, so you do set up these lots with these modified septic systems. Who polices those septic systems? Right? Who makes sure that they're properly maintained? Because that's then the municipality imposing their will on those private landowners to make sure that those septics are properly maintained and looked after. And that seems like it seems untenable or an incredible pain in the ass for staff in Innisfil to have to force landowners to prove that they're properly maintaining their tile beds. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to you.
Thank you, Mr. Rose. We actually have to do that right now with the Lake Simcoe Protection Plan. We have to monitor all the septic systems within 100 meters of the lake, and you're right, it's not a fun job. No. Anyone else? Going once, going twice. Anyone else? Ms. Hogarth.
This is relative to some comments that were made, but not really relative to this report. But I know that there are concerns about the widening of the highway. Maybe this is a different meeting, perhaps, but I'll say it now. A number of people have suggested, why not the 20th side road? Why not the 10th side road? That don't go through a small hamlet, that don't go through a already crowded place, that serve the same purpose and would achieve the same end result. So I just want to leave that thought there, because it's part of the coordination of everything that is going on now, all the different projects, and they're all affected by that. Just thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hogarth. Just to manage expectations, that horse left the barn a long time ago. That the county did the public meetings on the widening of County Road 4, I want to say 10-ish years ago. So I don't think there's much hope in actually having them relocate that road at this point. I just seem like the Debbie Downer tonight, don't I? Anyone, any questions from council? Councillor Waters.
Just one question from Ms. Hogarth that I thought that maybe Mr. Montgomery could answer, maybe not in services might be the person, but she did bring up the issue around capacity. And I made the assumption wrongly maybe that since the development has come this far that there is capacity, but her question threw that in doubt. So my question is there capacity in Churchill for these additional homes if the Churchill Downs doesn't have it? Thank you.
Through your worship, in-services was in the pre-consultation meeting, so there was a discussion about that. They're reviewing the functional servicing report, and my understanding is there is capacity, or we wouldn't have been able to get through the pre-consultation. So.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Councillor Ices.
Thank you, Worship. Maybe just a question to staff regarding the boundary line that was brought up. Like our official plan shows the boundary line of Churchill going through this property, and currently it's zoned agricultural, which this report speaks to changing. Just maybe a question on that line being there. Is that kind of make it an automatic that it's going to get changed because that's in our official plan? Just maybe to speak to some of the concerns of agricultural to residential zoning.
Sure, through your worship again. Yeah, there's a line, there's a settlementary line that obviously the 42 lots are inside and the balance of the property is outside. So the 42 lots are designated village hamlet, basically. We've got a residential hamlet designation on them. So we're looking at that. Obviously, they're requesting to increase the density. But in terms of agricultural land, yes, the rezoning from AG to residential, but the official plan designates that section of the property as inside a settlement area and residential at some low density.
Thank you. Any other comments? So I have a final comment from Councillor Drodge, the ward councillor. He wanted to thank everybody for speaking tonight and for the great feedback, and he also wanted to send his apologies for not being here tonight in person to attend, and that's it. So thank you, Councillor Drudge. And then we will we'll now go to the recommendation to receive the comments provided here this evening. So could I please have a mover and a seconder for the motion that is on the screen? Councillor Zanella, Councillor Richardson. All those in favor? That is carried. Thank you, everyone who's taken the time to watch this live stream meeting regarding the proposed planning application. Ms. Thoma, did any comments come in from the live stream this evening, other than Councillor Drudge's?
Thank you, Your Worship. Only the one I had indicated earlier that was pre-meeting start, but nothing's yet. But if anything does come into the clerk's office, we will circulate to council and planning staff.
Thank you so much. Anyone who wishes to provide comment may still do so and may also register as an interested party to be contacted before this item is considered by council. So please contact the clerk's office at clerksoffice@innisfil.ca. Council wishes to thank everyone for their participation, and we will now go to the confirming bylaw, and then we're going to adjourn. So could I please have a mover and a seconder for the confirming bylaw? Deputy Mayor Fowler, Councillor Constantine, all those in favor? That is carried. An adjournment, meeting to adjourn at 8:06 p.m. Councillor Richardson and Deputy Mayor Fowler, all those in favor? That is carried.